We've saved a seat just for you. There's always room at the table. It's Coffee with the Pastor with your host, Andy McDaniel.
Welcome to Coffee with the Pastor, everyone. It is such a great joy and a great honor to be with you today. I look forward to this every week as we have an opportunity to be with you each and every Monday. I want to thank you for sharing just a little bit of your afternoon with us. As we always do, we try to bring a conversation to the table that will not only challenge you, but will ultimately draw you closer to Christ. That's our goal. As we do everything here at Coffee with the Pastor, is our goal is to draw you closer to Christ. As most of you know by now, but if you don't, I am your host, Pastor Andy McDaniel. We've been with you for a little over a year now here at Coffee with the Pastor. I want to thank all of our faithful listeners and supporters of this ministry that we sit together and just talk about real things that matter. I've had an honor of serving the Lord for a long time now, over 20 years. Have the honor of serving here locally in my community of Fayetteville, North Carolina, over at West Fayetteville Baptist Church. If you're interested in finding a church home, looking for some different things, maybe a spiritual recharge or something in your life, come on, check us out. We'd love to have you. We're located at 2465 Gillis Hill Road in Fayetteville, North Carolina. You can get all events, times, and what have you at wfaybc.net. And we look forward to having you come and be with us. So today, it is great to be with you. And it is also great to welcome back a friend to the show, Dr. Allen Solheim. How are you today, my friend?
Good.
Great to have you. Thank you so much for being with us last time. We had a great conversation. I'm looking forward to another one today. I enjoy your conversation. I enjoy your experiences and your wisdom through the years of ministry. So today, Pastor, I want to talk about the subject of true victory. Now, again, that seems like a very broad topic or subject, and I know that we're just coming out of a brutal election season. I mean, there's not a question about that. It was very divisive and just ugly, and many are weary. I think many are weary, regardless of what side they're on or whatever, weary from the emotional currents that this creates. What I want our listeners to grasp today, what does true victory look like? Because it's not found at the ballot box.
Nope.
It's not found at the end of the game or the scoring touchdown, the winning home run. True victory is found in total surrender to Christ, living a life that gives us and shows us a manner that allows others to see Him through us. Scripture says in 1 Corinthians 15 and 57, but thanks be to God who gives us victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. How difficult is it for others to see victory in this manner versus what we've been conditioned to believe? I know that's a big question.
This is going to seem like off the topic for a second, but I
okay.
hope it's not. But when you first shared the topic with me today, I went back to the times I would work with young boxers. And boxing is a fascinating sport.
Yes.
It's the only sport you never know who won till it's over. You don't even know who's winning outside of the extremely obvious.
Right.
But I can win a round. I can lose a round. I may think this is really great. I did great. But victory comes in the end.
Yeah.
It's not in the process, the ups and downs.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right.
And so I think as you look at life, you got to be really careful, Andy, to not look at it so pragmatically, to this little piece, that little piece, but to put the pieces to a whole and then begin to see the pattern.
Yeah.
And victory is the final outcome of that pattern.
Wow. That's a great, it comes to mind as we're talking like that. It is somewhat to a degree like putting a puzzle together.
Yes.
You're formulating the picture, but that picture is not complete until that very, very last piece is actually placed in there. The one that actually goes in, not the one you bite the corner off of, but the real one. And I think that a lot of times as we're painting that picture, that canvas, that scene, wow, what a great thought that the true outcome is not known until it's over.
No.
I mean,
no.
wow. I mean, that really is. And really, I think even in the scheme of life, from the spiritual standpoint, it is that entry into, the presence of the Lord. That's where the ultimate victory is obtained. It's not on this side. But I think, have we become so conditioned to obtaining victory in a competition or in some type of contest that we can't grasp what true victory looks like and realize that it can't be bought or manipulated? Is that kind of, where do we see the human condition in that?
I'm sure we do. I think how many people are disillusioned as well because they look at someone and only see the piece and not the whole. Oh, that's a great person, wonderful this, wonderful that, and then they fall. And we're so disappointed.
Yeah.
Because we only see a little piece of the whole. I think character is something that's long term and it's built. Yeah. It isn't just little pieces here and then I'm a good man because I gave some money to somebody or whatever it is, okay?
Right, no, you're right.
But what's character?
Yeah.
And character, victory's wound up in who we are.
Absolutely.
Who we become.
No, I agree. I think that is a process. It's not, I mean, I look at my own life, and I'm sure you could say the same. I'm not who I was when I was 20 years old.
No.
I'm grateful for that, actually. But it's like, we used to hear the old sayings like the older, the wiser, and whatever. But I think a lot of times we do find conditioning. While we can see that as a good thing from an athletic, concept of I'm conditioning my body to be better prepared. But I think on the other side of that, and we were talking about this a little bit off air, the conditioning that some receive from a dogmatic way of it's this way and this way you do paint yourself into a corner. And I think with the idea that if I'm not winning the race or I'm not, number one, that somewhere the idea of there's something bigger, there's something better, it kind of becomes elusive. Someone maybe even doubts that, and that becomes difficult in a person being willing to pursue victory at that point. Wouldn't you think?
Oh yeah. I wish there was an easy formula.
Yeah,
it'd be wonderful.
Right.
But life to me is experiences, negative, positive, and those are the things that form who we become and who others see in us. And again, it's long term.
Yeah.
If you're only looking at the short term, I think people will let you down almost always. If you have too high an image, it's going to collapse somewhere.
Yeah.
But if you can begin to see the value in a human being, in a process that sees through the good and bad,
right?
You see victory on the end.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great point, because we live in this world of snippets and talking points. That you could have an hour-long speech or message or whatever, and someone goes in there and they take out 10 seconds or 15 seconds of something that they may or may not disagree with, but it's totally out of context when you only hear that part, and it gives a perception to others. Oh, they're terrible, but you didn't hear the whole. You didn't hear why I said that, because it could be completely. And I think we have to be very careful about that today, because in the concept of victory and understanding what that looks like, we find so many are defeated because they've been made to believe that victory is not possible, and the hopelessness that comes in that. And so while we don't always, I think one of the things that I'm finding, especially in the modern society today, is we don't always define situations in the manner the definition calls for. The word victory means defeating an enemy or an opponent. And certainly in your long ministry and all the times that you've been serving and working, and I know even in my time, we've witnessed a lot of people that battle against life.
Oh yeah.
And again, from the biblical point of view, whatever, we've seen sin and temptation and all these things are things that people fight against always. But many of them have absolutely come to the point to believe that battle can't be won. That it's just overwhelming. It's too much. But Scripture says in Romans 6:14, for sin will not have rule over you, because You are not under the law, but under grace. How do we take today, Pastor? How do we encourage those ones that are listening today to understand that victory in this life cannot just be found, but it can be lived in? We can live in that victory today as a witness that because of the power of Christ, we can overcome these things. How do we encourage someone to understand that today?
I think part of it is just simply to come beside them and walk them through it.
Yes.
And be there to walk them through whatever those experiences are. And ultimately, when they've come through it, to begin to realize that it wasn't failure.
Yeah.
It was process.
Oh, man, I love that.
Sometimes failure is one of the most healthy things that ever happens to us. We think, I failed. Sometimes that's the biggest step toward victory we'll ever have, because in failure we learn.
Yeah.
And others would look at us and say, oh, what a horrible thing, or bad person, or whatever. But in God's refining grace,
Oh, my goodness.
sometimes that is a process we're going through that's actually climbing and not declining.
I love that. The idea of the process.
Yeah.
It's like we think of anything, even a material thing, your homes or whatever. Well, that process was the beginning of somebody pouring a foundation or building a foundation and putting up a wall, and one thing at a time. It wasn't just automatically there. Even prefab houses still had to start with, with the formation of this material to put it together with. And why would we think that life's any different? My goodness, if we look at just the natural process from birth until the end, that little person sitting there. I mean, obviously, you're familiar with those in our church that have brand new little people, and they're totally 100% dependent on you. They can't talk. They can't tell you what they need. They can fuss and cry, but they can't walk. They can't do anything. But that process of teaching them to get to that place is dependent on your willingness to be the provider. That's what you said, that walking along beside someone. And if there are people listening today that are struggling with, well, I'm wrestling with this or that or the other, I love what you said. Sometimes it is the defeat in that will be your greatest victory.
The most recent experience for me of sharing that is my grandson.
Mm-hmm.
When he was going through ranger training, he had to repeat one of the three sections they go through. And I think so many people looked at that. He failed. He went through it. But he says today it's one of the best things that ever happened to him.
Yeah.
And he learned some lessons he could have never learned. That really helped prepare him better than if he would have flown through that in the end.
Oh, no.
I think that's a little picture of life.
That is. That is, it's just incredible. It is perception.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, again, you're right. Having not succeeded or produced on the first go round sometimes causes you to look at it better and actually understand it more later on down the road. There's a famous quote from Thomas Edison, and it said, he was he had all these different opportunities to make things and create things. He was, and that one time a news reporter came to him. And they said, well, I want to think it was the light bulb, but whatever the case, one of his inventions. They said, you've tried to do that 25,000 times and you've failed. What does that feel like? He said, I didn't fail 25,000 times. I found 25,000 ways not to do it. And that's funny on one side, but it is applicable, because it's like, okay, that is practical application. I think even from a scriptural basis, and every other thing. That's how we learn. I mean, think about when we were kids and learning how to ride a bike. You didn't do that the very first time you got on there. No. That took a bunch of skinned up knees and all kind, bloody elbows and stuff. But eventually, you figured out how to make those two wheels balance, and that's life.
Yeah, I think God understands the thing we're talking about now. Pride is one of the biggest enemies to God and to spiritual life. But if all you have is success, if you count that as victory, everything I go is right, I always am winning, at least in your mind, where's the end result of that? And
right.
It's a very proudful
Oh, yeah.
view of life.
Yeah.
If you stumble and fall and ask God to turn it around and work you through it, growth comes out of it, and you become a better person and a more understanding and empathetic person
Oh, yeah.
to others. Well, where's victory in that? It's certainly not in the that I just done well.
No,
therefore
not at
I'm
all.
such a good man.
Yeah. No, I think that there is humbleness in that.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned boxing. I was listening to an interview with George Foreman the other day, and they were asking him about what it was like to, being with Muhammad Ali and things like that. And he was like, well, he said, it taught me valuable lessons. He said, but the number one thing that it taught me was that I could be beat. I didn't think I could be beat before I got in there. He said, he said, obviously every prideful athlete wants to be, I'm indestructible, whatever. He said, but it really caused me to understand that life is that ebb and flow. It is that I'm not always going to be on the mountain, but that is okay, because I think we've created this dynamic in life to where if you're not on the top of the mountain, and if you don't have the penthouse, and if you don't have the Rolls Royce, then you're a failure. You didn't make it. But sometimes that's not everybody's position. And sometimes, like you said, that lofty position can seem mighty good. But it also, if you've had everything handed to you, or that's the only thing you've ever known, you don't know how to accept defeat.
No.
And
it's shattering.
It is. And then you don't know how to recover from that. And you maybe at times can become very bitter and very... you are of no worth at that point to be able to help others. I think that there's got to be, and sometimes, just as the Bible says, that if you exalt yourself, God can humble you, or and at times will humble you because you're not willing to learn, or you're not willing to be put back on the potter's wheel and say, you know what, I got a mar. There's a crack here that's not working well. I'm leaking water, and I need to be reshaped and remolded. And if we can't come to that place of understanding, and I think especially those that are struggling with the issues of life, I told my oldest daughter not long ago, she called me with several things and issues and complaints. I said, and my answer to her wasn't being sarcastic or non-caring, but it was like, welcome to adulthood. That's life. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
It's not about morals and rights and wrongs, and we can have all those arguments, but there are going to be opportunities in this life to learn, because if there's not, we'll never grow. Isn't it important to understand that?
Yeah. Oh, very much. I remember a man who was very influential in my life, one of my professors, and was very influential in the church world that he moved in. Very successful in the eyes of men, and did a great job. We were having a large citywide crusade in Portland, Oregon, in the big convention center, and he was keypinned to some of that. So they had a banquet to honor him one night, and said all kinds of nice things and gave him big gifts and all of that stuff. Then asked him to come up. I suppose I thought he was going to give some big speech or something. I still remember to this day what he said. God forbid that I should boast except in the cross of Christ. And he sat down.
Wow.
That's victory to me.
That
spirit is real victory.
That you are right about that. My goodness. And I think we could all have a lesson of that at times, because we all love the applause and the platitudes and stuff, and that's just part of our nature. Yeah. But I think we really, really have to be careful with that. I remember listening to the testimony of a extraordinarily well-known minister. I'm not going to give the name because it's pointless. But I remember him sharing, because he had gone through a very public, very ugly situation, and he shared in his prayer time that he was asking the Lord, as he was trying to restore some semblance of anything, he said, why did it have to be so awful? Why did it have to be so hurtful and painful and public and everything else? And he said he really felt in his spirit, the Lord said, it's the only way I could get your attention.
Yeah.
You got so big, here in the South, like my mother used to say, you get too big for your britches.
Yeah.
And it's like, you won't listen any other way. And there are times to where God will let you hit that wall, or let you find out, well, I'm too big for this, or you find out. And I think that, but understanding that sometimes even, and I know we got to take our first break, but even as David would say, restore unto me the joy of your salvation. He knew what he had and he wanted it back. Yeah. We're going to pick back up on that when we come back. Thank you for the first part of Coffee with the Pastor. We'll be back with you in just a couple of minutes. We are back. Thank you for joining us again. Here we are, Coffee with the Pastor today. I'm talking to Dr. Allen Solheim, and we're having a conversation about true victory. What does that mean? Again, we talked about being able to find victory through Christ and understanding the ability to live in that victory now. Now, saying that, I want you to understand, I'm not saying that we don't have still battles along the way, because we're still going to have battles along the way. Even though it's like, if we use it from a sports analogy, I won the first game of the season. Okay, I'm the winner. But there's 17 more, or in baseball, there's 160 more. And so it's like, okay, so there's a momentary thing, but don't get trapped into that. So the battle is still before us, but victory is obtainable, but it requires pursuing victory. It requires pursuing excellence and understanding, and also the moldability. A lot of people, I believe, are struggling with difficult times in life, whether it's just life itself, or the struggles of being, maturing and the responsibilities that come with that. And again, it could be health, it could be emotional, spiritual, all different kind of things, pretty much anything. But in the midst of those times, if we use a storm analogy, sometimes it's hard to see that that's going to come to an end. Sometimes it's hard to see how could this possibly get better. And I think one of the detriments sometimes that we do, and we're well-meaning, but in the middle of that storm that person is fighting, when we just tell them that, almost that blanket type saying, it's going to be okay. They can't see that. They can't. But at the same time, you don't want to encourage them to stay in that storm. You want to give them some light of hope. James chapter 1 says, consider it a great joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you experience various trials. Now that verse alone really trips up a lot of people, because I'm supposed to enjoy having this difficult time. No, it goes back to what you were just talking about. It's a process. It's a part of learning, because if you'd never, it's like Andre Crouch wrote, if I never had a problem, I wouldn't know God could solve them. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? Why have we created a system, I would say both in the world and in the church, have we created a system to where we can fix it with this and nothing ever goes wrong? Have people become deluded by some of these thoughts?
Oh, I think so. And it's not just now.
No.
I think it's been going on forever. I guess the church maybe is as guilty as any, Andy, of giving pat answers. And pat answers usually don't go very far. I remember when I first started taking clinical training, it was in McDaniel Hospital in Portland. My very beginning, I was just a young seminary student. I would go on later and pursue this on a different degree, but that first time, I went and seen a young boy who was having, it wasn't even a major operation, I don't think, but he was having some surgery, and we had to write verbatim. I picked him to write my verbatim word for word I'd said to him, and gave it to the therapist or my supervisor. Came back the next time, it was just full of red marks everywhere. But I still remember the one thing that sticks out in my mind. I said to that young man, it's okay, everything's going to be okay. And he wrote in red ink, what are you going to tell him tomorrow if it doesn't go okay?
Yeah.
I've never forgot that.
Wow.
We have to be really careful when we give platitudes and see things momentarily as the end of it all.
I think you're right. And I think that we have almost, to some degree, developed a system that is built on that, because, again, I think well-intended comments are to try and encourage and try to whatever. But the reality is, you're right. There are those who will experience a victory today from an encouraging word, while there are others tomorrow that will look at you and say, it didn't get better.
Yeah.
And then that not only drives them maybe further into their issue, but it makes them look at you a little differently. Well, what kind of stuff are you trying to sell? Because this, and I think the problem is that we give, we take the Jesus pill or put on the Jesus blanket and everything's great. But he didn't even say that. He said, if you follow me, it's going to really go upside down, because you're going to be in not only that spiritual battle, but you're going to be in an argumentative battle of, well, how can you prove X, Y, Z? And I think we go back to this passage from James. Not only does it says whenever you experience. So that is a word of assurity. It's going to come. Just like Jesus said, if you follow me, you will have tribulation. All right. And we won't talk about the tribulation. That gets me in trouble. You understand that joke. But here he says, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. Yeah. Now, endurance, we understand again from an athletic perspective, is the guy that is going to run the 20K or the 10K or the marathon or whatever today, he had to prepare for that. Yeah. And in a very hard, consistent, persistent, everyday mannerism, to where the very first day you could not have run that 5 miles because it would kill you. You'd never make it. You'd be sucking air the first 30 feet. All right, because you can't, but you got to get that 30 feet first, and then you got to get the 60 and on so and on. So I know even myself, even to this day, I love to be on the elliptical and work your endurance on that. But the very first time I ever did it several years ago, I didn't make it a minute, and I was already out of gas. I mean, it was awful. Now I can do a half hour and not even breathe hard. I mean, but it's an endurance thing. Here, can't we help the listener today understand the testing of your faith produces endurance? And he said, let endurance have its full effect so that you may mature. Yep. That's important.
Very much. And that's process.
Yeah.
I used to this sounds kind of crude, but I used to sometimes call, not to their face, but some Christians that I had to be around for a long time, honeycomb Christians, because I said they're drippy with Christianity. Something just didn't ring real. Yeah. It was just there, but it just, I don't know, it was a hollowness to it. It was like a honeycomb, drippy. Real Christianity, real faith, has a deep current that runs, and you see it. It's like a mountain stream. It's beautiful, steady.
Yeah. And I think that's a great analogy, because okay, you like you mentioned the stream and stuff. When you see that, not only can you appreciate the beauty and the majesty of stuff, but you don't question whether it's real. Yeah. Not only because you can physically, tangibly see it, touch it, and on so that, but it tells you what it is, and it's not a question. Whereas the other, oftentimes, and I love the drippy analogy. I think that's fantastic, because I kind of equate that. I saw this quote. I didn't create it, but I think it's important. If you have to tell someone how great you are, you're not very great.
That's true.
And I think that's, if I've got to go over the top to tell you that I'm a believer, I'm a follower of Christ, well, that may be a character. That might not be real. Yeah. Again, I don't want to question someone's salvation. I'm not in that business, nor am I in a position to do that. But I think people today, especially today, I think because we live in a world of such skepticism, everything's got a question mark behind it. Whether it's the results of a contest, whether it's whether people went to the moon, and we could go down 1,000 different conspiracies and all this stuff. But everybody questions everything. But I find, following and understanding the life of Christ, he didn't tell anybody who he was. In fact, he asked people to not say anything, because he wasn't about marketing in himself. He wasn't wearing the T-shirt or the hat. He was like, he wanted it based on his heart. What am I showing you? And it tells us multiple times that when he would get through teaching or get through saying stuff, it says they were amazed, or they were astonished, or they were in awe, because he spoke with someone of authority, and not in a militaristic or hammering the pulpit kind of way, but wow, he really knows what that makes sense. I think that sometimes we miss that because we miss the understanding of the necessity to learn. Because that's life, and I love how you keep coming back to that, because that is preparing for victory. I think when we prepare for the victory, it makes the victory mean more. I'm working to get there. I didn't just get it handed to me. I trained and worked hard and also. But even in that, like the old wide world of sports, or whatever it was back years ago with Harold Cosell, that's the agony of defeat and the thrill of the victory. That's true. But the agony of the defeat was not, oh man, I lost, I'm a loser. No, I got to do better. And I think we miss that when we only surround ourselves with drippy people.
Yeah. Or people who think like we do. That's a horrible place to be.
Yeah.
All you know are people that's going to reinforce and think
goodness,
as you do. There's no challenge to that.
No, not
You
at
only
all.
reinforce each other's problems.
Well, you're right. If everybody, and I saw this, of course, over the years in different places, especially when I was in law enforcement, the people at the top, the brass, the elected officials, if you will, they only wanted yes men around them.
Yep.
They did not want to hear anybody ever disagree with them.
Yep.
And I think again, there's a nature of pride in all of us to
Yep.
that. We always. You want to hear, oh man, that was great, or yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I was thinking too. But then they didn't hear what you actually said, and you could have said something silly. I saw a politician years ago, and he was giving this speech, and I actually listened to what he was saying, and the people just applauded like trained seals.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking to myself, did you actually hear what was being said? Because what was being said was not good.
Yeah.
It would not benefit you in the least if you agree to this, but we become almost trained, and I think it's a real struggle for people to understand the pursuit of victory. That there's something joyful about that, but it also comes with a few bruised knees along the way.
Oh, probably more than we want to.
A whole lot more.
To admit, but they're good for us.
Well, exactly, because again, you would not have learned. Wait a minute, that doesn't work. It's almost like hitting your thumb with a hammer. Yeah, it hurts like the dickens, but you learn over the course of time, don't do that. Be more attentive to where you're swinging the hammer. And I think that's the way with life. And I think probably especially in the biblical side of things, the spiritual side of things, ministerial side, is it's very easy to give those blanket answers, those padded answers, like you mentioned, it's going to be okay. God's got it. And again, I don't say that things to demean, obviously, the power of God, because I believe that with all my heart. God can do anything. God can still heal. God can do anything. But I think sometimes we don't understand the receiver of that. Yeah. Because if they're not prepared and their heart's not ready to receive that kind of answer, and they don't understand why that they sometimes not only turn that off and they don't want to listen to you, but they could very well walk away and never be receptive to anything when it comes to spiritual matters and really become the disenfranchised, the non-believer, the whatever. And so I think it's a struggle. It's a struggle not just for some who have come into the faith and understand believability, because they've kind of embraced what they've been shown. Well, everything got fixed when I gave my heart to Jesus. Why am I having all these problems? They're struggling with that. Nobody tells them that. You give your heart to Jesus, everything's great, but that's not true.
No.
And I think we got to be willing to say that openly.
I think I shared this with you before, Andy, or maybe one of our meetings together, but I don't think God is half so concerned as we think about what's happening to us in life. I mean, he controls and he can change things, but life is life. We have our ups and downs. We're all going to hit our fingers and we're all going to, whatever we're going to do.
Yeah.
I think what God's concerned about is how we react. I think that's far more important to him
Yeah. I
than,
agree.
than the other situation. The situations are going to be there. And character is how you react to those. And victory is when you get a pattern of reactions that are
Yeah.
positive
Yeah.
in the midst of life struggles.
No, you're right.
to me.
Well, you know, even in Scripture, in Revelation, it speaks of the overcomer.
Yep.
Well, by definition alone, the overcomer is one who overcomes something, whatever it might be. That meaning that there is we go back to the word process, or there is a struggle, there is a preparation for that battle or that game or that contest or that whatever. Maybe it's taking a test. There's a discipline, there's a study, there's a training, there's all these things like that, because outside of that, there is no overcoming. You will be defeated by whatever that issue is.
Yep.
And we can't just throw the blanket answer on there, because while the believer, quote unquote, for those that have, come to an altar somewhere or have said this or said that, and I'm not saying that those things aren't sincere, but if they've been given a message that when everything's great now, well, you didn't tell them the truth. Because Jesus himself said, if being the pivotal word there, you follow me, you shall, depending on where you read it from, have tribulation, which again is a time of chaos and confusion, but it's also a time of learning. But I think equally for the unbeliever, the one that is not in tune with spiritual things or understands things at all, they struggle with the reality of things because, well, I thought God was good. And if God's so good, why? And we hear those, why is there starving children, this and that? But nobody accounts and puts to account our accountability. Like you just said,
Yep.
God's not as much, it's not that he doesn't care.
No.
But it's like the world's going to be the world.
Yep.
And I heard a pastor say this several years ago. And again, while I think the blind squirrel finds a nut anytime, every now and then. And so while this person may not be someone that I would line up with in every kind of different way, but everybody can get a good note off every now and then. And this one guy said something that was amazing. He said, I'm looking at the church, and this was after the Supreme Court ruled that marriage could be whatever. Okay. And the church went hysterical. Everybody went off their deep end. And he looked right at the group that he was talking to, and he said, okay, we can not line up with that spiritually or whatever. He says, but here's the thing. What are you so upset about? The world is being the world. And I thought, wow.
Yep.
What a statement.
Yep.
And that's still true today. It's not about what we're doing, but like you said, what is our response? Because if the world is making horrible decisions, and whether it's political policies or whatever, what is the responsibility of the church to show a different place? How do we speak to that? What is and I think that's a good pivot in this conversation. What is our responsibility? How should we respond to things that we disagree with, but our response is what matters, because that's what shows Christ.
I think showing respect for the other person's position.
Yeah.
If I don't agree, I don't have to be negative. I don't have to call them down, like we've seen for the last how many months going on.
Yeah.
What does that prove?
Yeah.
I've said to my wife during this whole campaign season, why I just want to hear issues. I'm so sick of the negativism and the destructive things on everybody's part.
Yeah.
And when I was young, and it was different.
Yeah.
Politicians talked about issues. They never tore each other down.
No.
That's just one, but not only in politics, in life.
Yeah, it is.
Why do we need to destroy each other
Yeah.
and be at each other?
Yeah.
Respect the other person. Acknowledge you don't agree. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
I don't hold your position. It's not mine. But I'm not condemning you.
Right.
I
Right.
think that attitude is going to take you a whole lot farther than beating your drum and proving you're right.
Oh, I could not agree more. And I think, unfortunately, because of instant reactions, social media, what have you, we've seen real life stuff move more toward the entertainment world
Yeah.
of the more over the top statements that I can say, or the more, viral moments I can create or whatever. And this is in all walks of life, not just politics, it's sports and entertainment and ministry. I mean, I've seen just in the last 4 or 5 months, I've seen pastors, get in that so they can get a viral moment on stage, and they'll say something that, to be honest with you, sometimes is stupid and they should have never been said from a pulpit. But we're going to pick back up on that as we come back from the break. We'll be right back with more Coffee with the Pastor. Welcome back, everybody, to Coffee with the Pastor. Great to be with you. We are having a real conversation about life. And I pray that it's been a blessing to you. We've been looking at just the real honest struggles about trying to find victory. And it's sometimes for some people that seems like an impossible place. It seems like it's so far away. It's like standing at the 1 yard line and the end zone is forever away. But honestly, if you're a sports fan, if that receiver is fast enough, he can make it to the end of that field in 9 seconds or what. It's just crazy what sometimes victory is obtainable, but it's about the pursuit, and we've talked about the process and walking. I want to finish up our time today talking about walking in daily victory. Now, for some at least, I think that's just wishful thinking. Well, that's not possible, Pastor. I mean, you don't know what I'm going through, and on so on. We hear all this stuff. Paul writes in Ephesians that it is possible. He says, finally. So I think that word for me, when we think about this scripture, he says finally. What he's saying is everything that I've said to you is important, but this is the most important. This is the one thing I want you to get out of this. He said, finally be strengthened by the Lord and his vast strength. Put on the whole armor of God so that you can stand against. So again, you can stand against the schemes of the devil. He's telling you they're going to come. This is a preparation. We talked about the process. It is the preparation. I know I've got a science test on Friday, but it's Monday. I need to be looking at my notes, or I've got it's a preparation. He says, because our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and authorities and the cosmic powers of darkness, and on so and on. So he says, and because of this, take up this whole armor that you may be able to do it. It is the preparation. Pastor, how do we help others see the value of these instructions if indeed victory is a serious pursuit? If you really want to win, you've been given the tools, but will you use them?
I suppose first, and is to help them understand the tools are there.
Yeah.
But I think coupled with that is your own attitude and approach toward it. A loving, caring, empathetic human being that comes beside you, takes your hand and walks with you, can take a person a whole lot farther than someone spanking or hitting or pushing.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of victory.
Oh, no, you're right.
And I think just to have people reaffirm the worth of us as human beings, to accept us and our failures as well as our victories or our triumphs, and just to share life.
Yeah.
Takes it a long, long ways toward him feel good about ourselves, about the God we serve, and about our failures. That life hasn't ended.
No, you're
those
right.
moments.
No, and I think that is so. It is so important because I know there's a person that I've been helping for the last couple of years that really, really struggles with addiction.
Yep.
And they've had wonderful victory seasons, and then they've had times that it wasn't. And it was very recent. They had I guess for lack of better terms, the old statement that fell off the wagon, whatever you want to call it. And I remember them getting in touch with me during that time, and they were just weeping. And they said, "I'm so sorry I failed you." I said, "You didn't fail me."
Yep.
I said, "You didn't help yourself, but you didn't fail anybody. You're still human. You're still in this fight. Yep. You're still in this battle." And I said, here's how I look at that is okay, yes, you made a poor decision to re-enter or step back into that realm. Okay. But and maybe I'm wrong because I'm certainly no psychiatrist or whatever, but for me, as a person that's lived long enough to understand life, it is those moments that is a reminder to you that it is so possible. I have not beaten this in the sense that I don't have ultimate victory over this until I'm not here anymore. I think as long as we battle the flesh, whatever our propensities are, whatever our weaknesses are, they will always be your weakness. Yeah. Can we overcome them through the spiritual strength that God gives us? I want to believe that. I want to believe that God can give us strength. But at the same time, He does not put us under lock and key that says, okay, the person that battles with alcohol, you're never going to have another drink again. Well, you can't say that.
No.
You'd like to say that you won't, and you'd like to say that I've got the strength and the ability to turn away from it, but you may have a weak moment. I'm never going to look at that picture again. Okay, but and it's not about justifying stuff. To me, it's about a reminder. Scripture says, "But for the grace of God go I." Yep. All right. So I told this man. He calls me weeping. He calls me. I said, "Man, we're going to get through this." I said, "You're still as important to me today as you were when we first started working together." And I guess it was about 2 days ago, he reached out to me, and he's had another year of victory and another year of sobriety and really, really doing well. Yeah. And he said to me, "Man, I just want to tell you something." I said, "What's that?" He said, I just want you to know I love you." Yeah. He said, "You never threw me away even when I was broken." That's what we're supposed to do.
Oh, very much.
Because God doesn't throw me away every time I mess up. No. And boy, I'm so glad of that, because there's quite a few times that that's just true. And I think when we look at the blanket answers, we've talked about that a little bit during the show. Living with that victorious mindset. In other words, the actually believing I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. But I think the key to that is, will you let Him strengthen you? Which requires that we have that relationship.
Yeah. Talking about addiction, I think in the church world, Andy, we could learn a lot if we'd step back and study AA for a while.
Yeah.
To confess it, admit we have the problem, to have someone say, "I did too," but say, "I'm here when you need me, call me." None of that's condemning. There's not a bit of condemnation in that whole program. No, it doesn't exist if it's run right. It's totally built on empathy and successful. Yeah. Because you relate to people where they're at, and you meet them as a human being with understanding. Yeah. Not condemnation.
No. And I think that is so much more. It's so much more productive. Yeah. Because as you said, early in your tenure in ministry, and I certainly know that I came out of that mindset as well. It is so easy to fall into the I'm the judge, jury, and executioner mindset, because I know everything, and I've got all this biblical text that I'm aware of, and I can point my fingers at everybody and stuff like that. But again, I go back, and I know some people disagree because they're like, "Oh, well, you got to, you're taking too soft of a stand." Jesus did not.
No.
I mean, even at his, I would say at the harshest that you ever saw him get was against the Pharisees. But even at that, it was with a broken heart.
Yep.
It was with, better. You're not helping. Because you do know the text, you're the scholars, you're the professors of the day, if you will. And therefore you know better, and you're not applying the healing balm to the sick. You're not doing it. You're giving them everything else, but you're not helping anybody. It's like a doctor today that has the cure for your heart disease, but they want to give you lifesavers or something. I mean, they're not helping, but yes, so they have the knowledge, and that was the only reason he got upset with them, was because the value that they could be to others, you're not living up to that. And I think that coming along beside the hurt and the broken, it doesn't soften the message. And some people, again, the legalists get their feathers all ruffled about, we got to damn everybody and this. But that's not what God says. How do we, as we're wrapping up our time together, how do we get one outside of understanding that? How do we get them to finally come to a conclusion? And again, I don't know that there's any magic answer to this, but that and maybe even specifically to the believer, to understand it is the approach, it is the attitude. That's how we win people.
Andy, when our oldest son was 15, give or take, I forget the exact, I think it was 15, he had cancer. And the doctor said he had 25 to 50% chance of living 5 years. Well, he's 50-some years old now and cancer-free, but that's another story.
Wow.
At that point, we were thinking he probably was not going to make it. Watch people's reaction, and I'm gonna have to say this is reality. Some of the worst people we had to deal with were believers.
Yeah.
With the answers. We got so sick of hearing jump the cancer out and drink this juice and on the one side, and then God's going to heal, it's going to be okay. I didn't know it was going to be okay.
Right.
I had no assurance it was going to be okay, and I didn't think it probably was going to be,
Right.
to be honest with you. But you know who really helped was a group called Cancer Mount.
Wow.
And Cancer Mount was people that had cancer. You would go there, and it was kind of AA for cancer. They knew. They had gone through it.
Wow.
They knew what you were going through. They never gave pat answers. They never promised anything.
Right.
It was those people that really were a balm. And I remember one night I was really at a low spot. They were going to do a laparotomy on my son. And it just didn't look all that great.
Yeah.
And we had a family we were staying with that we were close to. And they were a musical family that did some concerts, and they made a very semi-professional music family.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sitting there. I was really hurting. And all they did was go over to the piano and sing.
Wow.
That was probably as healing as any words
Yeah.
could have ever been in the world.
Yeah. And sometimes I think we miss that.
Yep.
Because we think we've got to have an answer.
Yep.
And sometimes the answer is just be there.
More often than not,
Yeah.
that's what heals. That's
Yeah.
the balm. I remember, again, back when I was just starting in the hospital world, just my first days, I walked into a room of a young teenager who, I didn't know who he was. I mean, he just walked in the room. And he had cancer, and I think was told that he was probably free or whatever. Anyway, it's a long time ago. But I remember it came back, and he just, with tears, looked at me and said, "Why did God do this to me?" And Andy, I didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
I walked out of the room. I didn't have a thing to say to him at that point in my life. I didn't have the pat answers for that.
Right.
Time and years of ministry, I'd be totally different today.
Right.
But I still wouldn't be giving them pat answers.
Absolutely not. You know, I just did just last week. I was part of a memorial service for a 6-month-old child. There is no answer for
Oh.
that.
And there isn't, exactly.
Other than we just have to trust God's wisdom in all things, but also come to the point that it's okay to say, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Because that grieving mom and dad, you can't tell them, it's all okay. You can't say that.
No, it's the
Because
worst
not
thing you'll
okay.
ever say.
It's awful.
Yes.
You know, and I think you have to point to the mercy and graciousness of God. Of we don't know why, but in the same time, was it a blessing? Did He spare that? Did He spare that loved one from something that He knew that we don't? Well, but we could go down a lot of different roads. But I think that the number one thing to do is just be there and say, you know what, we care for you. We're here to encourage you.
Absolutely.
That's
what heals. That's what that family did to us. They had no answers.
Right.
They were just there.
Yeah.
I've often said, Andy, when people, why? Never ask the question why.
No.
It has no answer. Rather, ask the question, what?
Yes.
What good can come out of this?
Yeah.
What can I do with it? How can I help someone with
Yeah.
it? Those has answers.
Right.
But why never has.
No,
Usually
it don't.
never has an answer.
You will never get an answer to why.
No.
You know, I've dealt with, and I'm sure you have too, but I dealt with a lot of suicide in my police career and in my ministry career, and that is the one question that the family struggles with the worst is why did they do it? And absolutely nobody's got the answer to that, except for the person that's not here. And so I agree with you. I really try to stay away from that, because you just get into opinion then. And then sometimes that opens up a mess more than anything. Well, friends, that does it for us this week. What a great conversation. I pray that it's been a blessing to you, and we've really given you some fruit for thought about the reality of victory and how we can obtain that, but that it's not easy. It is something you got to work for. It's not going to be, you don't get introduced to the team today and have a Super Bowl trophy at the end of the night. You got to work for it, and and it's 18 games away, or whatever your chosen sport is. But it's a task, but it is one that can happen, and we can get there. And I want to thank you for listening. Thank our guest, Dr. Solheim, with us today. What a great joy it is to always have him here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving us a part of your day. Thank you to our fellow pastors out there, guys. Keep looking up. And keep encouraging those that you have been given, that God has blessed you with, and always point them to the victory of the cross, because that is where we find the answers. Thanks again for your time. Lord willing, we will return next week with the next edition of Coffee with the Pastor. Blessings to all. I am your host, Pastor Andy. This is Coffee with the Pastor, where Jesus is good all the way to the last one.
You've been listening to Coffee with the Pastor with your host, Andy McDaniel. Connect and learn more when you visit the podcast page at Christian1057.com. And join us each week for Coffee with the Pastor on Christian 105.7.